Alright, first things first, you probably didn't buy this. Somebody gave it to you, you found it in a drawer, through inheritance, by some means you have acquired a Rohm handgun. Even though these are incredibly cheap, they are real guns, so check to see if it's loaded, put it down, and don't play with it. You may have heard some other pronunciations, but I'm going by Röhm because of this guy. His last name was pronounced Röhm. That's probably correct. Your typical Röhm handgun is going to have a pot metal frame, not even aluminum. Usually in a small caliber, like 22 long rifle or 22 short, but there were some 38s and 44s in the mix. But they do have steel barrels. The quality of these handguns runs from dangerous, like with this RG-10, up to passable with this RG-66. The only thing overtly wrong with this RG-66, it's just your typical single-action clone, is that it has a scary light trigger pull. This gun is somewhat famous in that it featured in Dawn of the Dead from 1978. It was the gun that Flyboy got caught in the elevator with. The pot metal used in these frames is going to lead to timing issues eventually. You wouldn't want to be throwing lead spalling every time you pull the trigger. Again, softer steels in the cylinder are going to add to that, and it probably wouldn't take hammer strikes very well. There isn't really a forcing cone to speak of in between the cylinder and the barrel. No real options for ejection either. The original solution was a little shell poker that screwed in right here, and you would have to manually index the cylinder and poke them out one at a time. Of course, it got lost. The sights on this are remarkably not terrible. I'm sure you could get some kind of sight picture out of it, but I have a feeling that the use case for this was pull, point, and shoot. These earliest Röhm revolvers were truly made in Germany. I guess they don't always make good stuff, and then imported into Miami, Florida. But by the end of the 60s, production had to be moved back domestically. That was to circumvent the 68 Gun Control Act. This RG-66 is also chambered for .22 Magnum. I don't know if I would trust that. I do have the cylinder for it. One thing of note is that these don't usually have much rust on them. The pot metal won't. It will get this weird sort of corrosion all over it, and if you stick it in a leather holster, that sort of exasperates it. These crop up every once in a while at like a pawn shop. These truly did come out of a drawer, which is where I got them. There really isn't any cool provenance to these. A variation of a Röhm revolver was used in the attempted of Ronald Reagan, and that's probably only because these were incredibly cheap. These truly did retail between $12 and $14 a piece back in the 60s. I'm sure some of their firearms broke that rule for pricing. Once domestic production ended in the United States, they were still imported into Canada, I believe all the way through the 90s. This being in .22 short only is probably going to be a little anemic for self-defense anyway. It's actually a little astonishing that this RG-66 has a frame-mounted firing pin. That seems a little advanced compared to the other models I've seen. There really isn't a reason to even seek these out anymore. There are much better options around nowadays from like Taurus, Ruger. I guess if you wanted to use these as like a display piece, a conversation starter, they're kind of interesting, not necessarily good shooters, and they most often they just didn't age very well. They weren't taken care of, they lived their lives in drawers, or they kind of just fell apart. I have legitimately seen more broken pieces of Röhm revolvers than I have actual working firearms. This, even being the better of the two that I have, I could not imagine paying even $100 for it. 75, 50 even sounds a little high. None of my criticisms have anything to do with these being like small caliber .22 long rifle. I think you should arm yourself with whatever you feel comfortable with. I don't think .22 is particularly a bad cartridge to arm yourself with either, considering I own this.